Hello and welcome to Pathways, where you are invited to join me for a visit with leaders in personal development and cultural evolution. This is your host, Paul O'Brien. Peace and purpose can be difficult to find in our hyper-connected world. With breaking news, social media, and endless entertainment at our fingertips, our attention is being pulled in 1,000 directions at once. Today, we're talking about how we can transform the feeling of information overload into an overflowing abundance of compassion. Our guest today is Vincent Thibault, author of the new book, Overflow, A Buddhist Guide to Navigating the Chaos of the Digital Age. Vincent is a Canadian writer who has published 15 books in French, including both fiction and nonfiction, with various publishing houses in Quebec. From novels to travel memoirs and philosophical essays, his work is surprisingly varied but keeps exploring key themes: the meaning of kindness, the quest for clarity and wisdom in a hectic and noisy world, courage in the face of uncertainty, and the reconciliation of tradition and modernity. Well, hello, Vincent, and welcome to the Pathway
Hello,
Show.
thank you very much. Happy to be here.
And I have a feeling I mispronounced your last name. Can you
Well,
pronounce
it
it for
depends.
us?
Do you want the Quebecer version or the French version? I say Thibault. Thibault.
I'll,
There you go.
Thibault. Okay. All right. Well, let's start out by asking you to tell us about your decision to produce a monumental work on Buddhism. I consider it a monumental work. So, what motivated you to do this?
Well, first of all, that was maybe 6 years in the making. So there's quite a lot of the work that went into that. And, it's I can talk with all sorts of different people throughout the days and weeks. And something that comes up all the time is too much. The experience of having too much to do, too many things to do. Most of us feel overcrowded or submerged, if you will, overwhelmed. And it seems that the feeling of going through one's life as if it was an endless to-do list is ever present all around me. And, we have access to so much. It's incredible. And yet we're never fully content, right? So this is something that I started picking up, through conversations and through my own experience as well.
What kind of problems does this create for us on a personal level? All of this information, all of these distractions, we're bombarded constantly. What problems arise because of that?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people will connect with the general idea of being fatigued. We're tired. We tire easily because we have so many things to do in a day, uh, so many different types of tasks that we're supposed to cram or, somehow do within any single day. And there's a bit of a brain fog and inability to make informed decision, a lack of confidence, a lack of spiritual clarity. There's even and that's a subject that is important to me. There seems to be a decline in empathy and compassion. And also, we tend to always stay on the surface of things, right? This is a TikTok era, if you will. So everything has to be somehow reduced to a snippet or a few seconds here and there, which, might be good every now and then. But we have this tendency now to always stay on the surface of things because we want to do the next thing, right? And that brings up all sorts of
Yeah.
issues, as we know.
And you point out that it's legitimate for people to feel compelled to be constantly running, to be in a hurry when everything seems to be going so fast. And I like the way, and I've heard people just call this hurry sickness that we are burdened with these days. But you point out in your book's theme is that our current overload is directly linked to the very nature of samsara, which is a Buddhist term. Can you unpack samsara for us for a second?
Um, okay, it is indeed a Buddhist term, and it refers to it does not refer to a geographical location. Okay, it's not like if samsara or nirvana was somewhere specific on this planet or wherever, it would be easy to reach. We buy a plane ticket, whatever, we get there. But it refers to a state of delusion. Now, delusion in the Buddhist sense or confusion is a very wide-ranging term. It implies lots of different levels of confusion, but it involves the um, inability to see things as they are when they are not clouded by our concepts, our ideas, our thoughts, our emotions, our belief systems, and so on and so forth. So it involves a lack of clarity.
Right. Okay. And you write a lot about clarity. How would you define that?
Um, Ultimately, to use it to reuse a Buddhist expression, it would be seeing things as they are, basically. And that's easier said
Mm-hmm.
than done, right? We have so many layers between us, if you will, or our idea of ourselves, and things as they are, or reality, right? And yeah, as I said, our judgment and our perception of things is constantly clouded by habits and all sorts of emotions and belief systems and so on.
Yeah, including our self-concept, or what some people refer to as ego or egocentric, the egocentric
Mm.
delusion, the fantasy that I may not be the center of the universe, but I might as well be, as far as I'm concerned. And you've mentioned the lack of empathy, but you maintain that love is actually a key for achieving clarity.
It is both. In a sense, it is both a cause and an effect. What I mean is that it is a key, but it is also part of the fruition. Once we achieve clarity, it is easier to feel love and compassion and genuine simple kindness, but also training ourselves in developing that kindness and loving feelings and compassion and so on helps us cultivate clarity. See, the thing is,
Mm-hmm.
uh, most of our confusion, when we look at it closely, and often it helps to have a meditation practice of some kind, but most of our confusion is linked in one way or another to self-referential patterns, right? We feel that things are
Right.
complicated, but this feeling of things always being so complicated have much to do with self-referential patterns. Once we can break through those, eventually we can reach a certain fastness and be truly, genuinely present for others.
Right. So, in other words, we can simplify our life, our way of approaching life. And you talk about how impermanence, or the idea of impermanence, can help us with clarity. Why don't we bring up the three jewels of Buddhism? The impermanence, the the idea of suffering, and the lack of a fixed self.
Well, those are three. Yeah, I'm sorry. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are three ideas central to Buddhism that your book, unpacks for us. And I'm wondering if you can just describe them for us right now.
Yes. Happy to. Of course, these are huge topics. I mean,
Yeah,
we can
yeah, of
spend a
course.
lifetime with any of those, but they're all important. And you mentioned impermanence, and just this one uh, in itself is extremely profound. By impermanent, we mean, well, not permanent, right? So non-lasting, if you will, transitory. There are all sorts of nuances. Um, but basically, when we talk about impermanence in Buddhism, uh, and that's not just a Buddhist thing, if it's a universal truth, if you will, uh, the very fact that we will all at some point die, that's part of it, definitely, and also get older, even if we happen to pass at a young age. At some time, there's immediately an aging process that starts right from the first moment from the first breath we take, and we're going to get sick and so on and so forth. But it also refers to the fact that compounded phenomena, okay, uh, don't ultimately last. What I mean by compounded phenomena, I don't want to get overly technical here, but anything that is made of parts and that depends on causes and conditions. So pretty much everything we relate with is compounded, in this sense. It could be our institutions, our body, uh, our coffee we're drinking, anything, our parents, our relationships, our professional, our career and whatnot. Those are all compounded phenomena. And uh, since they rely on causes and conditions that are themselves impermanent, they are bound to change at some point or dissolve or, end.
Right.
And so as you can see, this is a vast topic and it goes way beyond just contemplating the fact that I'm going to die and not just other people around me. I know, people die. I'm losing friends every year or whatever, I know it happens to people, but me, of course, I'm going to go to 120 years old and I'm going to pass very calmly in my bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So
So why do people have such a hard time? The concept of impermanence, it seems to me it's fairly obvious that everything's always changing, that change is the only constant, but we just have such a hard time staying aware of that and accepting it. It's like we want to sort of like, grab a hold of life and, come to the outcome that we want and live happily ever after. So,
indeed, and yet, you're pointing to something that is so important. Is that you just said this is something that's fairly easy to understand, right? Or to grasp at an intellectual level. Let's put it that way. Everybody can understand that
right.
things and people pass, and we're all aware of that, and yet we act as if this weren't the case, right? So, uh, part of the Buddhist approach is to train one's mind. And by training the mind, we don't just mean some kind of mental gymnastics, developing a kind of specific skill to be more efficient at work and whatnot, which could be very nice. But that's not necessarily what we're talking about. Training the mind involves training the mind to replace bad habits by good habits, all the way until there are no
Hmm.
habits. That's part of the Buddhist view. But this involves changing your way of seeing things. So basically, what I'm saying is that even though impermanence and the fact that we're all going to die is very fairly easy to understand from an intellectual or conceptual point of view, we need to spend time with it to actually make it, uh, you know, transfer it into our own experience, an actual view of the world, and change our behavior and so on. So,
I think maybe part of the challenge is fear of death. I mean, we can accept change is fearful because eventually we're going to die. And I think people in our culture, most people have a really hard time um, with the whole idea, accepting their own death. And I think one of the things that Buddhism or that Buddhist culture encourages is to stay aware of your mortality and realize how precious this opportunity of our life is, but also that change can be a friendly force. It doesn't have to be a threat. And I think the whole concept of reincarnation supports that. But reincarnation is not necessarily a Buddhist um, uh, belief system, although I think Tibetans generally believe that. Do you see? It seems to me that reincarnations. I feel like it gives me a sense of hope and also a sense of meaning, in that all the meritorious things I might do in this lifetime are going to rebound to my benefit in the next lifetime, and that in the hope part is that there really is no death; it's just a transition. Is that the way you see it?
partially, yeah, this does resonate, um, but you're kind of
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, touching on a very important and very profound subject. See, the Buddhist view is a bit different than whatever we would see in different traditions, because you're totally right. Different traditions do speak of reincarnations in one way or another, or a, afterlife, or call it what you will. Um, but see, Buddhism is not saying that at the end of one's life, it is a pure void and everything ends there in a big nothingness. That would be a nihilistic point of view. But it doesn't say that you're fundamentally remaining the same person from one life to the next, which
Right.
would be, from the Buddhist point of
Right.
view, what we call an eternalistic point of view. So those are
Right.
considered two extremes, right? From the Buddhist approach and from the Buddhist point of view, and so we're trying to avoid the two pitfalls or two extremes, if you will, of eternalism, believing that there's a lasting soul and that you're, more or less remaining the same from one life to another, and nihilism, where you think that, well, once I'm dead, that's it, no consequences whatsoever, and so on. And I think the image or the analogy that I think could be like we're trying to keep it relatable or understandable here, but see, if you're taking a candle and using a candle to light a second candle, right? It's just an image. You have this
Mm-hmm.
flame that gets from one wick to the other. Now, you can't really say that it is the same flame, can you? But you also cannot say that it is a different flame altogether. Something a little bit like that.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. In order to get clarity and ease and tenderness, these qualities that your book is supporting, in a fast and noisy world, you maintain that one needs a spiritual path. And of course, you are describing the spiritual path known as Buddhism. How did you come to that? I mean, were you brought up a Buddhist? Probably not.
I was
I'm just curious.
I wasn't exactly. Um, and to be clear, thank you for raising that question. Yes, the book definitely offers a Buddhist take on the whole thing, because this is what I've learned, this is what I practice. But there are different
Mm-hmm.
spiritual approaches that are totally legitimate and very profound. And there's so many benefits from different traditions and so on. So I'm totally respecting the other approaches, just to be clear. And you also don't have to be a
Mm-hmm.
Buddhist or practicing Buddhist to enjoy the book. But no, I was brought up in, French speaking Quebec, which explains the accent. And
See.
maybe you'll add caption or no. And my dad was an atheist, but of a level-headed type, if I'm making any sense. Not like an aggressive atheist who feels the urge to tell you that
Right.
you're stupid to believe in anything. He was very open-minded. So was my mother. But eventually, as a teenage boy, I really got into martial arts, and this opened my mind to all sorts of philosophies and spiritual approaches from Asia. And then eventually, I got
Mm-hmm.
beyond the folkloric approach, beyond the purely cultural fascination, and got to meet incredible masters of the Tibetan tradition, especially, and got to study with such teachers for the past almost 20, 25 years almost now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Your book really kind of uh, explicates the middle way, if you will. I mean, the that middle ground between nihilism and eternalism, the middle ground between trying too hard, like as in spiritual materialism, which you bring up quite a bit, or not trying hard enough. It's really interesting. You quote Chogyam Trungpa quite a bit, and he's awesome. He's so brilliant. And you say that he warned us against becoming too introverted, constantly observing ourselves to the detriment of a direct and supple relationship with the world. Well, that's that sounds that sounds like what a lot of people on what they consider a spiritual path are doing. This relentless drive for self improvement. Uh, what do you say about that?
Uh, I agree. I think it's an important thing to be aware of. It's definitely a pitfall. Uh, that we're bound to grapple with in one way or another, either in our life or on the spiritual journey, whatever journey it is. Uh, spiritual materialism is not just a thing that was, that Trungpa Rinpoche came up with in the 70s for, specific types of students. It's a universal tendency. It's very much present and prevalent in the world today. I call that a little, sometimes I make jokes. I call that Instagram spirituality. uh, it's all
Right.
about yourself, and this is a caricature, right? I'm making light of that, but of course, I also fall prey to that. Sometimes you take yourself too seriously, or you use spiritual ideas to find some kind of confirmation about your own identity, and start to talk about,
Or some status,
yes,
perhaps.
exactly, and collect badges, and like scalp badges, like you're being a good
Right,
boy, a
right.
good girl. And also, the
Hmm.
one of the dangers that Trungpa Rinpoche was talking about in this quote is the tendency to use spirituality or meditation and whatnot as an escape plan. An escape plan, like you're using that to disconnect yourself or distance yourself from the world, and it's a little
Right.
iffy. It can be extremely useful to do some retreats every now and then, but if you're adding barriers between you and others, and you and the world, uh, that's not exactly my path. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Well, as somebody who has spent some time in Buddhist monasteries in Asia, I became aware of the fact that there were people that joined the monastic ranks. And my perception was that they were avoiding doing their emotional work. It was just a way of being avoidant of uncomfortable social challenges or relationships. So I think that's speaks to what you're saying. And this world where we're so busy and there's so much going on, and one of the things we have to contend with if we want to simplify our life and have a more spiritual point of view and have more peace and ease in our life is this encouragement to well, you call it the entrepreneur mindset. And I'm going to quote you: the entrepreneur mindset is commonly held in very high regard to the point that we are now pressuring nearly everyone to become an entrepreneur. You also describe this as the widespread glamorization of busyness. I think that's such a good point. It's because what is social media? I mean, everybody wants to be an influencer. That's a form of entrepreneurial endeavor. And it is glamorized, and we're up against that. This is a kind of a social pressure that we all are aware that are experiencing. And have has what is the solution? What is the path? What do you recommend? How do we overcome our confusion or our addictive habits of self-achievement?
If my answer was buy this book, or pay $1,000,
Yeah, right. That's a good
you know
answer.
what I mean? Like if I told you, oh, you pay $1,000 and you go to this workshop, or you buy this book or this video or whatever, and you get the answer, I'd be a little skeptical, right? You have to have a good BS detector, right? um,
Yeah, right.
but I think, okay, uh, uh, if I have to give a general framework, if you will, I think there are three main steps, if you will. Of course, this could be a lifetime's work, obviously, and it still is the case, definitely for me. Uh, but I think first we need to learn to relax. It sounds so simple and stupid, but learn to tame the monkey mind. uh,
Yeah, right.
that's just one piece of the puzzle,
And
but it is an important one.
and and meditation is a really good technology for
I
that.
mean, yes, it's absolutely wonderful. Of course, meditation can mean anything. Some people use it to refer to something completely different. Uh, in my view, it is just part of the deal, so to speak, learning to, tame the monkey mind or reach some sense of calm. And then the second step, if you will, involves training the heart. And by that, I mean cultivating deliberately through specific methods, cultivating loving kindness, compassion. And that's not just good feelings kind of compassion. Okay. I'm talking about courage and strength of character and so on. And then the third,
Right.
sorry, you,
Go ahead.
and then the third has to be around wisdom, like we talked earlier about learning to see the way things are when not veiled by our own concepts and ideas and emotions and thought patterns and so on. Uh, but we have at some point to learn to soften our relationship with all phenomena, both inner and outer, because the complications we're facing every day, the busyness, the always being busy and so on, is not just about the outer world. We like to blame everybody around us. We like to blame, Mark Zuckerberg and whatever, uh, but it's a very different experience of the world once we learn to be at ease with our own mind. And
Yeah. We've run out of time. There's so much more we could explore, but we have run out of time. And I want to be sure to tell our listeners about your website, which is www.vincentthibault.com. And that's spelled Vincent, THIBAULT.com. And I recommend that people go there and find out more about your work, and particularly this book, Overflow, which is so timely and so relevant. And for those who may be listening to Pathways Live on a Sunday morning and have turned in late, this is your host, Paul O'Brien, producer of the visionary I Ching Oracle, an app that supports great decisions and perfect timing. And we're so glad that you are with us today. Please note that you have the ability to review hundreds of interviews in our online archive at divination.com. You can play and or share this program whenever you want via the internet or as a free podcast, and I'll tell you how in a minute. Today we've been visiting with Vincent Thibault, author of Overflow, a Buddhist guide to navigating the chaos of the digital age. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into Pathways, which is currently broadcast on KBOO FM in Portland, Oregon. And you can have a free subscription to our podcast, which you can also find at divination.com. That's spelled DIVI nation.com, or by searching Pathways Radio on Paulo's YouTube channel, where you can give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Feel free to forward a link to your friends. And this is Paulo bidding you adieu and reminding you to tell your friends about Pathways podcasts. And thanks again to Vincent Thibault and to all of you listeners for tuning in and being a part of the Pathways conversation.